Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Research at Citi podcast. I'm Ann Malone, the North America head of equity research at Citi. With me on the podcast today is Ron Josey, our Internet Analyst here at Citi. Today, we're going to have Ron provide his view on the potential effects of AI, major trends and developments to look for in the sector, and insights into what you can expect going forward. So he's going to look into that crystal ball. Welcome, Ron, and thanks for joining us.
And thanks for having me. It's exciting.
So AI is the new kid in town. So what does that mean for traditional internet?
We're figuring that out as we speak, and that's what makes this job and this role in this sector, in my opinion, one of the best out there. I firmly believe how we interact with the web today, either through the browser or through apps, or tomorrow when glasses or whatever AI device comes up, is going to change completely. And we're starting to see that already. And that's what's the most fascinating part about this. Search engines are now answer engines, right? If you're not getting an answer almost immediately to your question, you sort of think about, you take a pause and you're like, why don't I know the answer immediately? And so how we use and interact with the web today is going to change completely over the next couple of years. And as I think about the companies across the internet sector that built the internet sector today, that's Google, that's Meta, that's Amazon. We'll throw Reddit in there and Pinterest and Uber and like the list goes on and on. Models are changing and models are evolving. And some of those companies, the best companies are evolving quite with it. And that's what makes so much change and so much interest going on.
And each of those firms that you mentioned has taken a different path in their model. But considering the investment we've seen so far in AI, how do you prove that the investment's delivering? What are the metrics? I assume that is one of the big debates right now in your sector.
I mean, yeah, that is the debate. There is an argument to be said that if this is the next industrial revolution, or quote unquote, right? Or if this is the bigger than mobile transition of internet, but frankly, the internet, then I think it might be unfair to ask for the ROI 2.5 years into it. That is a comment.
Fair
That is
enough.
something that's
Fair
out
enough.
there. That
Yep.
said, we're seeing the benefits today, or at least some of the returns today. I think it's fascinating. Let's just take search as an example. After about 2.5 years or so of OpenAI launching ChatGPT, that business now has about 700 million weekly active users. That's unbelievable in terms of the adoption and growth. To say it's mainstream is an understatement, right? And that's done underneath Google's nose to a certain extent. So what has Google been doing? Google has launched Gemini. Google is working on improving Gemini for their core search business. You have a Gemini app, which is their assistant, but then core search is AI overview and AI mode. So in other words, generative AI is becoming part of search more and more. So search is becoming answers. That's one example of what they're doing. And then, by the way, there's a whole nother part of the internet world, which is the software as a service, the SaaS world. And Gemini is helping Google's cloud business really see revenue reaccelerate. So I think you're starting to see the returns there to your question on ROI. If you're Meta, for that matter, look, I think we're early days on what Meta's doing. We are spending a good amount of CapEx across the board, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But in terms of ROI, Meta is seeing revenue growth reaccelerate. These are not small businesses, and to be growing 20+% quarter in, quarter out because of changes that they're making to their ranking recommendation engine. So, and it's not as if we get on Meta or Instagram for that matter, and we open up our reels and we say, okay, we've got 5 minutes to just sort of decompress or do whatever, learn about something. And then after 5 minutes, you're up. No, I get on reels. I see a bunch of videos on things I'm interested in, like skiing, for example. Next thing you know, it's about sailing, and then it's windsurfing, and then it's airplanes, and then the list goes on and on. And that 5 minutes goes into 15 to 20. Point being is this 15 to 20 from 5 is all about Meta's investments in the ranking and recommendation engines because of AI. And we're early days on that. So great example, the ROI on Meta, you can actually touch revenue reaccelerating because engagement is growing. And then if you're Amazon, you go on shopping and they're doing a better job of merchandising. Oh, you just bought a ball, maybe you need a pump. Simple things like that make nothing but sense. But merchandising has always been something that Amazon can do a better job of. And now with tools like Rufus and others, you're getting there. Notwithstanding Amazon's investments in AWS, we think they'll spend about $80+ billion in infrastructure CapEx this year. This is Amazon for AWS. AWS will start to reaccelerate here sooner or later. And I think there's a few proof points already. And then the last one, as I wrap this up, Ann, is on the efficiency side. So all these examples were on the growth side, but more and more companies that we speak with are talking about 30%, 40% of code being automatically generated. Or call center contacts are going up, automated call center contacts are going up as people are more satisfied in the results. And so you're seeing a time where we have real opportunity to drive top line growth while improving all overall efficiency and margins. And that's really special, particularly as we get into the level of CapEx that's required and then the ROI and everything else. So there's some proof points right there.
Only comment I'll make there is I wish I only did 15 to 20 minutes of scrolling. I'm far worse. So you threw out some numbers and dollar numbers that are mind-boggling. So the amount of CapEx that we're seeing that's growing, where are those investments going? And anytime you can mention a dollar amount would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, look, just off the cuff, in this year, if you just look at infrastructure CapEx spend, in other words, not necessarily the retail side of Amazon, but the AWS side, we think Amazon, Meta, Google combined will spend about $240-ish billion. That number is going on our numbers close to 450, upwards maybe $500 billion in 2029. And these are gigantic numbers for gigantic companies, but it tells you the opportunity that's up there. And so where are we investing? A lot of the investment is in two worlds. It's the infrastructure. So it's buying the chips, it's buying the racks, it's making sure everything's cooling and all that stuff. That's the vast majority. But then it's also building out the data centers. And you've had Meta come out and talk about a data center coming out that they're building that's the size of Manhattan. And these data centers, not only are they not small, they require a lot of energy, like 1 gigawatts up to 5+ gigawatts as needed. And so the vast majority is on the infrastructure, which are the chips, the tools, the data, the actual machines. And then, of course, there's a good amount spent on data centers, but the actual buildings. But by and large, it's the infrastructure spend where these dollars are going, because that's the differentiator. And as I sort of maybe answer too much in this question here, it's fascinating to see Google invest in their own chips called TPUs, and Amazon investing in their own chips called Inferentia and Trainium. And then Meta is even building their own chips called MTI. So there's a lot going on here as infrastructure, as the spend just goes up, and the importance of infrastructure because you need that compute.
I don't think that should surprise us, right? There's always opportunity for vertical integration, right? Anytime there's a revolution or an evolution. So we're spending a lot. We're starting to see in various ways the growth, the savings. So how does AI evolve from here again, and how does it sit in the world of internet?
Yeah, so we're spending a lot for sure. We're seeing that engagement go up. The average person on Instagram, by the way, is around 50-ish minutes a day. And TikTok is upwards of 70 to 80 minutes a day. There's a lot of time, right?
There goes society. There you go.
Yeah, a lot of cat. We've emerged beyond cat videos. Now it's at least videos that we want to see, right? Or at least for the algorithm. But so we talked about engagement, we talked about the investments in CapEx, and now I think it's a fair comment that let's think about monetization. And the internet runs on engagement first, and the ex-CEO of Google a long time ago, a guy named Eric Schmidt, would always say URL, ubiquity first, revenue later. And that's what's happening here, right? Let's get the engagement going. Let's drive greater convenience on users. And when you see that, eyeballs follow, advertisers follow eyeballs. And so on the monetization side, look, the future of advertising is changing as we speak. Not only are more advertisers attracted to and diverting more spend to performance-based networks, that's social. That has always been search. You could argue search has been the best business ever created. You're looking for a new pair of shoes and you type that into Google and you get ads for shoes, right? But the future of advertising is going to performance networks. I'd highlight that's social, that's Meta, but also Reddit and Pinterest and TikTok and others, Snap. That's also search, and increasingly a newer format that's CTV or connected TV, connected television. And more importantly, as you think about where these dollars are going, the creative side has been the hardest part. So advertising back in the day was you would spend all this money on creating an ad, making it look beautiful, and maybe it doesn't speak to you. It speaks to the other half of the population, right? And so creative is being built in an automated way, whereas we're no longer in ABC type test mode where advertisers can say, let me see if this ad jingle resonates with you, Ann, or resonates with another person. Let's try 1,000 different versions of this. And we can do this because it's all automated. So bringing back to your question on monetization and where do we go from an AI perspective, AI is enabling the advertisers to basically go to market with thousands of different ad creatives, see what sticks per person. And then that's going to drive, call it better return on ad spend, because ideally that person is incented to buy, right? So that's on the ad side on monetization.
I don't know if that's exciting or creepy, right? There's a close debate there. And I guess no different. You could see this in any sector, that iterative, that ability to speed things up. That's drug discovery, that's clinical trials, right? You could probably take any sector that you know and turn it into how much faster and smarter we can be with this. And probably we won't figure out for a long time everything that we can do with it.
And I missed two key words in that in my answer of like creative being automated. It's now more personalized, which might be your comment on like,
Yeah.
you know, a little bit scary. And it's personalized, way more targeted. And I'll give you a third sort of buzzword. It's measured. And the fact that we can measure the effectiveness of every single one of these ads, that measurement is just becoming better and better and better across all these platforms. And that's what drives an advertiser's adoption of certain platforms, right? And we call it the return on ad spend, or ROAS, because of the personalization, the targeting, and then the measurement on the back end to prove out the value here.
That's great. That's a great collection of terms to think about. So we're kind of wandering through this topic. On the device side, what happens with devices and all of this?
Yeah, well, you know, we sort of started the conversation on how we interact with the web is likely to change dramatically over the next 5 or so years. I think we're starting to see that today, i.e., 2025, and more so in 26. Right now, the vast majority of time spent on internet is via your mobile device. Full stop, right? Of course, we still use browsers and desktops, et cetera, but mobile is where internet is being used today. But what's fascinating is AI is going to change that. And so we've been using the Ray-Ban Meta glasses now all summer long. We love them. And you don't have to fumble to pick up your phone out of your pocket. If you're riding on a bike, you can just say, hey, Meta, what am I looking at, or where am I going, or what time it is? And it just sort of works. You saw some news earlier this week. I think Apple came out with new AirPods that have automatic translation built in. And so I think on the device side, maybe what you see is an evolution to more on-person device that's less obstructive to you stopping what you're doing to pick up your phone and interrupt a conversation. And if these devices can be more helpful to you with called a look aside technology or a heads up display like many of us have in our cars today, then that's interesting. OpenAI came out and they bought a device company this past summer, I believe, or in May. And it's unclear what that device is, but the bottom line is an always on internet is something us internet geeks have been waiting for forever. The phone has been the closest part of that. And now, assuming battery power lasts for these devices and the glasses, then it really is always on. And think about it this way: you're riding your bike down, you know, say you're going on a bike ride or whatever, and then you miss a road or you got a text message, you can't pull up your phone. You're going to talk to maybe your glasses. And if there's a heads up, you can sort of see. And that's a use case that doesn't really exist today. And getting back to the premise of what internet is, which is engagement first or ubiquity first, or later, if engagement is growing, that's good for time spent. Obviously, that's good for monetization, and the list goes on and on. So I think these new devices are evolving to be always on and sort of on our person as well. One quick stat, sorry to drag on here, but I think about 1 billion people wear seeing eyeglasses today. Most people wear sunglasses. So if it's just the folks who wear glasses to see every day, that's interesting as Google and Meta and Snap all come out with their own glasses, and I'm sure Apple would as well. But then on the sunglass side, transition lenses are becoming, you know, inside outside. So
what's the statistic? I think the average human right now has an attention span that is shorter than that of a goldfish. Imagine us all wearing sunglasses that are internet always on. I mean,
well,
that's going to be interesting, right? To
let's hope
see.
we can improve that. At the very least, we'll be looking at someone in their eyes and be distracted, as opposed to a phone in the middle.
So we'll be hiding our distraction.
Yeah,
Good.
right.
That's a good. I like how you found the upside to that. If I think through all of the areas in your coverage that touch upon, another one that comes up is travel. What about travel? It seems like a natural, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's actually phenomenal in terms of what Gen AI is doing there. There's a lot going in within travel. So you're looking to book it. You have 3 days to go to Italy, as an example. And the ability to type in a natural language way, most natural language search engines will throw ChatGPT out there. as one, but also Google does too, and Gemini, what to do in 3 days. Where should I stay? Or I'm looking for a hotel that's 4-star, 5-star with a pool that's on the Spanish Steps, but I'm only there for one night. I need to go down to or up to Florence. So I think travel is one of the verticals that is probably the most forward facing in terms of the adoption curve of generative AI. And it's actually fascinating. And we did a survey of internet users, which is all of us, and asked about search trends. And what do you use Google for? Was one of the questions we asked. And they used Google. People responded with commercial queries. I'm looking to buy something, or I'm looking for whatever. The number 2 use case was on travel. Number 3 use case was on research. Then you had into local and restaurants. Like the list goes on, but just remember, number 1 was commercial, number 2 was travel. When we asked ChatGPT users, what do you use ChatGPT or generative AI assistants for? The number 1 answer was for research. So not necessarily commercial. Number 2 is travel. So it's a natural experience to say, I'm thinking about doing this, or where should I go? Or once I go there, what should I do? And so take that aside. And by the way, travel is probably a top 2, maybe top 5, but certainly top 5, maybe top 2 advertising vertical on Google. And so you have Booking, you have Expedia, you have Airbnb, and of course, every other airline and hotel spending gobs of advertising dollars to make that booking, because every booking you don't make on their service is gone forever, right? And so there's a great question on what is the existential threat to travel if everything goes through these assistants?
But wow, is it disruptive, right? I mean, it
Or
really
could be at the same time, most every hotel in the world is on Booking. And one of the things why Google never really got into travel is every time someone books a travel, there's always invariably something happens. Either you cancel your reservations, you're going to arrive later, you need customer service, you need X, Y, and Z. And so I think the OTAs are built for that more so than call it the answer engines that are out there. And so travel is, we'll see where this goes longer term, but it's certainly a very natural use case for these generative AI assistants.
Okay. I'm going to pick my last one wisely just because we're running out of time. How about autonomous vehicles? Because that's right in your wheelhouse too with Google, right?
With Google being the owner of Waymo, we cover Uber as well. I don't know, Anne, have you been in an AV before? Have you tried a Waymo?
Not brave enough. No.
It is a
I'm
phenomenal
old school,
experience.
Ron.
I'll tell you what, once you go into one of those and you get comfortable, next thing you know, the music's playing with what you want to hear, the temperature is there, and you're reading your emails. But I think the answer is we are in a spot where it's working. There are full-on proof points. San Francisco is a great example. Uber is partnering with Waymo in Atlanta as well as in Austin, and the demand has been off the charts. I think Uber's talking about greater utilization, and we know that Tesla launched their robotaxi in certain cities. And so I feel as if the number 1 gating factor here is not necessarily the regulatory, believe it or not, or the technology, it's the manufacturing. And so how quickly can these cars come off the assembly lines that have whatever the technology, either Waymo Driver 6, which might be based on LiDAR or whatever it is. And so I think what you're going to see is just greater investments in the manufacturing line to get these cars out. And the reason being, why do we need the cars? Because the demand is there. And so maybe over the next several years, I think you're going to have a good amount of competitors or offerings per city. And if you do that, someone like an Uber that has about 170 plus million monthly active customers on their platform, they call them Mapsies, they sort of are in a better spot because they can aggregate the demand. And we all know if you have this great technology, but you have no front engine to drive adoption, that's a lot of cost that goes down. And so then you're like, I need to spend on customer acquisition. And that's arguably one of the largest costs once you go live, right? And so this is something where we think quite a bit about the technology and where we're going. And we sort of think Uber is in a pretty good spot here as we think maybe longer term of where this goes. So AV getting smarter and smarter, the LLMs, because of Gen AI is enabling that. The hardware is something we'll see more coming off the manufacturing line, so to speak, as the software makes these cars better and better. So pretty fascinating to go from Gen AI to AV, and we can talk for hours about more disruption happening.
This was great. And I have to think a lot about myself, how much change is coming and how ready I am for that. But it's always energizing to talk to you, Ron. So I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on September 12th, 2025. Be sure to join us for our next Research at Citi podcast. Feel free to explore our previous podcasts, all of which are available on this channel and other channels as well. And be sure to look out for our Research at Citi Markets Edition podcast. It's a 10-minute breakdown of the equity and global macro markets each and every week. Thanks so much, everyone.
This podcast contains thematic content and is not intended to be investment research, nor does it constitute financial, economic, legal, tax, or accounting advice. This podcast is provided for information purposes only and does not constitute an offer or solicitation to purchase or sell any financial instruments. The contents of this podcast are not based on your individual circumstances and should not be relied upon as an assessment of suitability for you of a particular product, security, or transaction. The information in this podcast is based on generally available information, and although obtained from sources believed by Citi to be reliable, its accuracy and completeness are not guaranteed. Past performance is not a guarantee or indication of future results. This podcast may not be copied or distributed, in whole or in part, without the express written consent of Citi. Copyrights 2025 Citigroup Global Markets, Inc. Member SIPC. All rights reserved. Citi and Citi and Arc Design are trademarks and service marks of Citigroup Inc. or its affiliates and are used and registered throughout the world.